So go ahead and navigate to the jQuery website, and this is for your own benefit for seeing the documentation and the many wonderful things that jQuery does for you that actually makes the JavaScript more succinct. So I'm going to introduce that a little bit today, and we're going to talk through some of the changes.
So what can JavaScript do?
Well, you're about to find out. You're about to find out. All right. The other thing I want you to do is you're going to open up Finder or Windows Explorer. Go into your NMC folder or GitHub folder. It's up to you. If you want to keep this on GitHub, you can. So go and put it in your GitHub folder, and then you can do whatever. You're going to create a folder inside of here, and we're just going to call this our weather page. Weather page. Okay. And once that is created, go to Visual Studio Code, and you're going to open that location, your weather page. Okay. So we have Visual Studio Code open up into the weather page, and first thing we'll do is go ahead and create an index.html. Okay. Call this let's do local weather, or yeah, it doesn't matter. Okay. Then go back to Finder and double click on your index.html so that you can see your page. Isn't that a beautiful page? Yes, it's very pristine. All right. So let's do a couple of things in here first. We want to include our JavaScript library. So I'm going to type script, and we're going to use the source with emit. Okay. And I have this CDN we're going to use. Does anyone know what a CDN is? It's an acronym, if you haven't figured that part out. And a CDN is basically Content Delivery Network. Okay? So we're going to use this site here, and it has the library already for us. The current version, I think, is 3.7. We're just going to use the 3.5.1. Okay? And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come back up here. I'm going to create a new file. And I'm going to call this the weather client.js. Okay? Weather client.js. Now, I could have called this anything else, but because we're going to be using an API, a web service, to get the weather, and we're going to use our JavaScript file here called weather client.js to read that data that comes in, and we're going to parse it and then include it from the data and update elements on our page. Okay?
Sorry, sir, where did you get that link that you just put into the source?
This one here or this one?
Or the index or the source?
Yeah. Let's see. Is there a chat within Moodle? Yeah, let's see if I can find that real quick.
You could probably just put it into the shared file that we had before.
Well, I think I can just put it here in the introduction page. Put it under the announcements. Yeah, I'll do that. I'll put it under announcements. Oh, goodness gracious. Quit. All right. You should see it in Moodle. I added it as a discussion topic. It's called jQuery URL, and you can find it there in Moodle. Does everyone see it? jQuery URL. All right. Okay, so we have our script tag. We've got our weather client over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another script include, and this will be source. And I'm not referencing a JS directory. It's just right at the root. So we'll just type weather client JS. Okay. All right. That is everything we need now on the page to link our jQuery and our JavaScript file. It's right there, which is completely empty. So let's do a couple of things. We'll just do an h1 local weather. I'm going to do a style tag here at the top, and I'll just say everything is going to have a font family of, let's do Trebuchet. Let's do that one. Okay. All right. I'm going to go back to our page. We'll refresh. There's our local weather, our font. Okay. Everyone understands what the asterisk does?
Selecting all.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Let's create a div, and inside of our div, we'll have a span, and we'll give this span an ID, and we'll call it temp. Okay. And let's do this. Let's put another span, and we're going to use an entity. Let's see, degree C. Does everyone know what that does? Yeah. I'm going to use another div right below it, and another span. And we're going to do this as temp F, and let's call this one temp C. Okay. Span. We'll use an entity again. HTML entity, degree. All right. Any questions so far with what we have? Any questions? All right. What do you think this is going to print?
Oh, the little Fahrenheit thing next to the C.
Yeah, the degree symbol.
We just did with one.
Now, there's another way to print that as well. You don't have to necessarily use that. You could use something like this. You could do a superscript and put an O. And superscript is going to take the O and move it all the way to the top. Right? If we did sub, it would move it all the way to the bottom. Right? Let's go ahead and refresh it and then reload the page. just so we can see what we have so far. Yeah. I kind of like the little entity better than using the superscript, but it gives you an idea. You could, do it either way. All right, I'm going to take out that superscript for a moment. All right, so you'll notice that there's nothing here. Nothing here. All right, and we can see that there's nothing listed there. In JavaScript, let's go over here for a moment. If we wanted to change something in JavaScript, we could just say document get element by ID, and then we would just say in single quotes temp C dot inner HTML equals something here. And we'll put a semicolon at the bottom. That in itself is going to overwrite what is inside of the span tag. All right, so if we refresh it, did I save it? All right, hang on. We're going to use a little bit of JavaScript magic here. We're going to do $ document dot ready. There's the pause button. And then we're going to say, oh, hang on, I did it wrong. It's function. There we go. Put our semicolon there. Take that. Put it up there. All right. In jQuery land, what this does is it says when the document is fully loaded, execute this function. And JavaScript, I'm using a anonymous function. Okay? It's a function on the fly that's executed when the page is fully loaded. Okay? So I'm going to refresh it real quick just so we can see what happens. And there we go, something here. Okay? All right, let's talk real quick here about what's happening. On the index HTML, we had a ID called temp C, and there was already some text in there. But you'll notice that what happened? This method says everything inside of the span, replace it. So with an inner HTML, you can actually post your own HTML with an inner HTML. Okay? Now the other way that we would do this, we could also do this through a similar fashion. We could say $, and by the way, the $, is a special notation in jQuery. All that means is I'm using a jQuery function. That's really all it means. It's the same as saying this. Run this jQuery function. Okay? But jQuery is thinking about how to streamline all of your typing and typing out all these long commands. And so they say, we're going to take the jQuery master function and we're going to squeeze it down just to a $ symbol. That's what that does. Does that make sense? So we're going to use the $ because it's faster. Now inside of it in jQuery, the way that you identify elements is either with a single quotes or double quotes. You can use either one, okay? But then you have to specify using CSS selectors. So real quick, in the classroom, can someone tell me the CSS selector for an ID? What is it? It's a hashtag. And so I want to use the temp F, so I'll say temp, just like I'm using regular CSS. That's how you identify it. Now, all I have to do to run the same thing is this. I'm going to say it's, how hot is it outside, guys? What do y'all think? You think it's 90? All right, we'll just say 90. All right, so we'll save it. Again, the way this works, because up here at the top, we've got our jQuery method, we're loading all of those feature APIs, all of that JavaScript in, we can use all of their language features, okay? Just because we have this script source. It's the first thing at the top, it makes it available, and then we say now load our own script, weather-client.js. And because it does that, we get this feature of the jQuery method to tell it, hey, load the document, and when the document is ready, execute this function, which encapsulates these two calls, right? So first one is called is this one, something here. Next one is HTML90. All right? And we'll refresh, and there you go. Okay. Now, of course, this begs the question. Many of you may be asking, well, why in the world would I ever want to use just plain old JavaScript when I could use something so succinct and powerful like jQuery? Well, you need to learn jQuery. You need to learn both. You need to learn especially how to use the language features in JavaScript, because JavaScript itself now has evolved to the point where it's actually a server language, not just a browser scripting language. Okay? Now, to be clear, everything that I'm doing right now is happening in the browser. The browser is the computer that's interpreting the code and it's executing it on the fly. They've taken that functionality and they've created this environment called Node.js, and it's a server that can run on Linux, and you could call it and it'll execute all of the server logic. In fact, it has logic for connecting with databases, for making web server calls, for doing all types of advanced mathematics, everything you can imagine. So it's important to learn both. These are JavaScript is like base knowledge, just like HTML, just like CSS. jQuery is the API that shortens it down for us. All right. Here's the thing that you must keep in mind, though. jQuery is designed around the document. Okay? It only works in connection with what it's doing with the document, meaning there has to be some HTML for it to interact with. Now, it does have code that it calls from JavaScript to do like web server calls, but once you get it back, you want to interact with the document, like what we're doing here right now. All right, so we have this bit of code. Does anyone else need to see this real quick? Are we good so far? Okay, let's stub out some functions for a moment. Okay, let's create a function, and we're going to call this get weather data. Okay? And for our purposes, we're going to go ahead and supply, two variables, not variables, parameters, lat and long. Okay? And for this, we're going to use a standard piece of code in jQuery that basically goes out and does a HTTP call. Now, anyone tell me some of the standard verbs in HTTP when you make a call? Do you remember what those were?
Post.
Post.
Get.
Get.
post.
Yes, there's also another P one. Put, delete, right? There's actually a whole bunch, but the ones that we only use for web services are generally get, post, put, and delete. Okay, those are generally the ones we only use. All right, so I'm going to paste in some code here. Whoops. It's not all the code. What happened? Let me do this again. I don't know why my keyboard's not responding. All right, let me format this for a moment. All right, so this is a big piece of code. And some of it, you're going to be like, what in the world is this? Right? Let's break it down little by little. All right, so first of all, we have our function definition. And the function takes a lat and a long. And then we have this jQuery call. And you can see that we have $, which is, again, it's referring to the title, the title method, which is jQuery. We're using dot notation to access a get method. And get here is referring to the HTTP verb of get. Okay? You also have other variations you could use. You could use, well, it's not going to tell me here, but you also have post you could put in here. You have delete, or you could just use Ajax. And Ajax is a generalized method that can do basically get, post, delete, and so forth. All right, so let's pause for a moment. I'm going to pull up the API again, and let's go over here and we'll just type in Ajax. Now, does anyone know what Ajax is?
One of the strongest people in Greek.
What's that?
One of the strongest warriors in Greek.
Okay. Some of you may be like, isn't that what my mom uses when she cleans the toilet? Isn't that what I use when I clean the toilet? My mom makes me clean the toilet. All right, so Ajax is an acronym that became pretty popular back about 15 years ago. So let me just say this. Do y'all know what XML is? So XML is like HTML, right? It's just like it, but XML is strongly typed. It's every parent has to have a closing child. It's very strongly typed. And the problem with XML, when you're way back in the day, they would send these giant XML files, and they were just heavy. And so they decided, well, let's find another way to send data. And they thought, well, what if we take JavaScript notation and we create objects, and then we convert those objects to string and send the strings, and then when we get to the other side, we'll deconvert those strings back into objects. And everyone said, hooray, yes, that's the way to go. Well, they needed a way to do this, and this is where Ajax came in. And Ajax basically means asynchronous JavaScript and XML. That's all it means. Now you may be asking, I thought we weren't using XML. Yeah, you're not. But when it was created back in the day, that's what they were sending. They were sending XML files or XML data instead of JSON data. So this gets to kind of another topic, asynchronous. We talk about learning being asynchronous sometimes, right? Sometimes this class is asynchronous, meaning you guys are during the week off on your own, you're working, you're trying to do it on your own, and then you're coming back together and you're interacting with the class. That's an asynchronous part. A synchronous part is when I would say something to, what is your name again? Lance, and Lance immediately responds. That's synchronous communication. Asynchronous is when I may look to the back of the class and I say, Gavin, what are you doing? And Gavin never responds. And so I move on, and after a few minutes, Gavin recognizes that I asked a question. Then he says, oh, I was working on my assignment. Right? I'm messing with you, of course, okay? But that's asynchronous because other things happen. Life goes on, other events take place. And in terms of JavaScript, asynchronous kind of becomes powerful because you can go ahead and process other code without having to wait on a server response. All right, so imagine if you're writing your code and you're having to wait for somebody over in China, their web service, to respond. What would happen on your page? It would pause. Everything on your page would pause and everyone would be like, it ain't working. Why is it? It's like it just keeps spinning and spinning and spinning. Well, asynchronous solves much of that. It says, okay, I'm going to make the call, and while I'm waiting for the data to come, I'm going to go on and process other things in the page. Okay? All right, so this is Ajax with jQuery. So let's go back to our data call here, and we've got some data that we're going to process. We have a URL, we have an anonymous function, and in JavaScript, you can do things where the parameter goes both ways with the data. Okay? So the data can receive the data and it can also push the data. So in this instance, the parameter is the data that you might pass in, but it's also the data that you're going to receive. All right. So I've got another piece of code here. We're going to paste this in. And I'm going to go ahead and paste this into our discussion. Let's see. So this is also pasted in the forum if you guys need to go back and look at it. But this is an open API for going out and getting data. And you can see it's saying the context is this is the application we're calling within this website. The standard is you have the version of the API. So this is apparently version 1. And we're calling the application called forecast. And then it requires several parameters, several get parameters. Okay. You guys okay back there?
I was just helping him understand the concept.
Okay. So we have a lat and a long, and I went ahead and grabbed the lat and long for Saipan. So this is 15.21 latitude, 145.75 longitude. Now, our method that we design allows you to set the lat and long. But for right now, we're going to hard code it. And then it's saying, and give me the current temperature. We want the wind speed. We want this hourly, the temperature, and the relative humidity, and the wind speed, okay, for hourly. So when we copy this data, let me just copy the data real quick. Let's open up a page, just paste it in. How aggravating. Okay, we're going to go in here and we're going to paste it in. And look at the crazy data that this gives us. But it's data, right? So on that far end, it's actually got live data feeds that are coming in by the hour, storing it in the database, and then setting it up so that someone else can call an API and go get that data. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to process some of this data and get what we want. Okay? All right, so let's go back. By the way, if you want to read more on this, you can go to open-medio.com. And right now, this is a free API unless you use it more than 10,000 times a day. Okay? If you use it more than that, then you have to start paying for it.
So 9,999 is a unit.
Per day. Yeah, per day. It's not bad. I don't know if your website can handle being hit that much anyways, right? If your website got hit that many times during a day, it would probably go down, and Infinity Free would say, listen, this is no longer free for you, right? All right. So I've got, so far, a little bit of information. I've got a function to get the weather data. So what I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to take this information and I'm going to get rid of it. And I'm going to call my get weather data. And for right now, I'm just going to pass in 0, 0, because we're not doing anything there. Okay? So we want the data to be stored in a variable. Now, this gets to the types of variables. Can anyone tell me the 4 types of JavaScript variables that exist right now?
Variables, not data types?
We haven't talked about data types yet. A data type can be a variable, right? So there are 4 types of ways you can create spaces in memory. Okay? And for those who were in my Java class, not JavaScript, but my Java class, you recognize that when you create a variable, you're actually taking up physical space in RAM. It's the same way with a browser. Okay? So anyone know the 4 types? Const. What else? Let. Someone said var. And there's one more.
Is there anything like objects?
Var?
There's const, let, var, one more.
Else?
No. This is called automatic.
Automatic.
Yeah, automatic. So if we look right here, you can see I have one type of variable identified. I've got a var. I also have another type identified here. This is automatic. I don't specify the type. I don't specify whether it's a constant. Okay, I'm automatically creating it. And when it's automatically created, it falls into the type of a variable. All right? So I want the scope of this variable, though, to be outside of my function. All right? So the scope right now in memory means it only lives in this function, the get weather data. Okay? So if I define it, though, outside of it, like, say, right here, let my items, now it exists at the global level. Okay? All right. One other question. What's the difference between a let and a constant? A let and a constant. I know you know, Christian, but let's let some other folks. The difference between let and constant.
If I remember correctly, let is like you make something to represent like what thing being.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
But there's a difference between a let and a constant. Gavin.
Can a let be like, it can be changed or like the value can be reassigned, but constant can?
Exactly. Exactly. So for example, if I wanted to create a variable that I never want to change, I could do something like this. I could say const cell CS symbol, and then I would do something like this. I'll just copy it from over here. So now if I try to do something with this variable and try to override it, the browser, which is interpreting the JavaScript, is going to say, no can do. That is a constant. We can't change that. Okay? However, you can take and combine things. This is called concatenation. And you may have seen an example of concatenation right here. I'm taking some data and I'm adding it to some string. And what literally it does is it's going to take the temperature and it's going to join it to another string and make it into a new string. Okay? Now, who understands what I just said? Because some of you look like, what is he talking about? I don't know. Let's think about it this way. If I have 2 plus 2, it equals 4. If I have 2 enclosed in quotes plus 2 not enclosed in quotes, it equals,
A string of 22.
there you go. Concatenation is where you can join two things together, just appending it right on the end. Okay? But it's all done through this magical add operator. Okay? All right. So let's pause here and think. We've got our data, and I'm going to take this out for right now because I don't want you to know all that just yet. We've got our data, and let's go back to our console now because we actually have enough to see some things on the page. So let's go to our local weather. I've got the console tab set. Let's make sure I saved everything. Yep, I saved it. I'm going to refresh. And down here in the console, I have the data come back. It actually called the data from that web API. And I can see that right now under the current field, it has, I think this is GMT time, which is 0630 in the morning. Every 900 milliseconds, it's being accessed, and it's saying that the current temperature here is 26.5 degrees Celsius. All right. Now, how do I know that? Why did it produce this down here? Well, if you look, I have this thing called console log. And in console log, it's going to spit out the data. Now, here's the nice thing. If you're doing JavaScript development, you can come down here to the console, and everything that is made alive through JavaScript is accessible through the console. So I can say my items because I created it. It's available. And if I hit enter, that's the data that's stored in the variable called my items. But it's also very interesting because now I can do things like this. I can say my items, and I want to see what the current variable of my items has. And now I'm drilling down into this subset. All right. Now we got to back up again one more time. The data that you're seeing here on the page is called JavaScript object notation. Okay? Think of it like this. In JavaScript, you can create complex data types with curly brackets and array symbols and all of that. And it exists as a variable that's different. Now, those of you who are in my Java class, this is something that Java just doesn't do natively. Java doesn't create appended variables upon itself in all strange configurations. With JavaScript, you can do this. The closest thing in Java that would do that would be like a map. Okay? Because a map, you could store something, an object inside of the map, right? Now, this is kind of cool because with JavaScript object notation, you can create data that would represent custom types. Like, say you create your own person object. The JavaScript object notation, as you pass that data, would send the data of your custom type, including all of its pertaining fields, person, name, age, all of that. Okay. So here, if we look again at this site, this is the JavaScript object notation. It's being delivered as a string, so it means that that whole piece of data is being converted from object notation to string notation. Okay? But when we look at it, we see the key value pairs, like latitude, and the value is 15.25. These are key value pair arguments. Okay? Key value pair arguments. Right? And then you get over here to current, and current, the key is current, and the value is an object. Okay, so if we're looking at our page, then we know that we can interrogate based on what is there. So I've got my items, I'm accessing the current data type, and I want to go drill down even further. So I'll say my items.current, and let's do temperature. And this is the nice thing about Chrome. It's going to offer me the variables because it already sees them. And now I have a way to access that particular variable. Okay, does everyone understand so far? Notionally, you understand, right? Okay, so let's take our data. We're going to copy that, come back to our JavaScript method over here. And what do we call the ID first for Celsius? What was it? Temp C. Okay. We're going to paste in our data object. Oops. Okay. So let's go back over here and then see what it does. There we go. There's the data. It pasted it in. Now, we don't necessarily need to append this extra piece, so we can take that out, because we define on the index page itself that this is where we want the Celsius to be. So we'll refresh that. There we go. All right, so we've got some of this data set so far, but let's think about this. I want not only my weather data in Celsius, but I may want it in what? Fahrenheit. I mean, do you all know what it means? I'll be honest with you. I'm kind of ignorant. When I see something in Celsius, it might as well be written in Greek. I'm like, that's what it is. Feels like it's 90 though, right? I don't know. That's just my own ignorance of not growing up reading Celsius. But we know that we can actually convert temperatures with an algorithm. So let's talk about how we would define an algorithm to do that. So let's say convert temp. And I'm going to pass in a degree as my parameter. And the logic for converting Fahrenheit to Celsius is pretty standard. If you guys took chemistry class or physics, this is something that probably you had to deal with at some time. Okay, so in our situation, it's basically then we're going to say C is the degree, right? And this is going to be multiplied times 9/5, and then you're going to add 32. All right, this gets to something else in JavaScript. When we want to do division, what symbol do we use? You use that slash, right? The backslash. Or is it a forward slash? I think it's a backslash. Is it a forward slash? All right. Well, anyways, you use that, right, to do the division. And the reason you do it is it's supposed to mimic how you set up a fraction. Because a fraction, if you want to find out what it is, you divide the bottom by the top. That's how you do division in JavaScript. If you want to do multiplication, you use what? An asterisk. Right. For those of you who are in my Java class, the same rules apply. Like if you want the modulus, you would use what? Percentage. If you wanted remainder, I can't remember what it is for remainder. Yeah. Anyways, so we have this data here. We've converted it, but in a function, when we call this function now, we want to get the data back out. And this is where we use a keyword called return. So basically what this is going to do is I pass in a degree in Celsius. Okay? And I'm going to it's going to calculate this information, and then the keyword return says spit it back out. So let's come back up here again. We'll do another jQuery call. This is $temp f.html, and we're basically going to embed a function call in a function call. So we'll say convert temp, put the semicolon at the end, and all I'm going to do is just copy what I know is the degree in Celsius and paste it in there. Okay. Everything is set. Let's go back and refresh our page. And there we go. Apparently, outside right now, it's 79.7 degrees.
That's what it is.
Well, that's what this site tells us. Yeah. All right. Any questions? Yeah.
So, besides loading, how do you go back, to return? Like, that does besides reloading.
Instead of like reloading the page?
Yeah.
Say you want, well, okay, yeah. Let's do this. Let's go over here to our index page, and we're going to create another div. And inside of it, we're going to create a button. Okay? I don't know what the B does. I think it's short for, yeah. Yeah, anyways, all right. Find out temperature. All right, let's just refresh it just to see what appears. Find out temperature. I'm doing it, nothing's happening, right? All right, so let's, this is another great example of where you can use jQuery to attach calls to a button click, okay? Now, in our situation, it's always best to use an ID. So I'm going to say the temp button, okay? So let's copy that. We're going to go over to our weather client, and we're going to create a function first. Well, we don't need to. We already got a function here. What we'll do is we'll attach the event of that button click to the function. Okay? This is something unique to jQuery. So the syntax is like this. We'll say $, single quotes, what was it? Temp button. Then all we do is say click. I think. Or is it on click? No, it's click. All right, and then we attach an anonymous function that it executes, and we're just going to call get weather data with 0 lat 0 long. And that will, on click, as we refresh the page, what will happen is this click event will be attached to the button. Okay? So let's go ahead and go back. Refresh. Okay, we got a... Oh, I got a mistake. There we go. Remember, a function has to have the double parentheses. All right, so let's go back again. Refresh. Console says we're good. And now it's getting the data. You can see it scrolling through at the bottom of the console, getting the data. All right. Any questions? Other than what are they doing upstairs? I know that teacher, and as she says, oh yeah, I says, you just need to move your class around so that everyone will, you know, get them in circles and talk. And I was like, I got laptops connected everywhere. Well, just move it around anyways. And I said, I'm kind of curious. Are you in this building at this time? She goes, yeah, I'm up there. I said, I thought so, because my whole projector is bouncing around. And anyways, side story. All right, this is just a simple introduction to JavaScript, jQuery, some of the things you can do. We've talked about manipulating data across on remote web APIs. You could take this even further, okay? You could go to Google. Well, they're so loud upstairs. You could go to Google and you could actually get an API key, and you could connect this to Google Maps and set the code up so that it would actually overlay on your Google map the temperature by wherever you click, because it would do that. It's all based on lat and long. Yeah. All right. Guys, that's all I got today. Any other questions before we close the class? If there are no other questions, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording for right now.